Welcome to the Tuesday edition of Juan's World, and as you might suspect from seeing my face as opposed to my stove, I'm not going to be doing a recipe today. I didn't do anything very interesting in the way of cooking over the weekend because I was working a lot on the books that I'm under contract for. But the books did lead me to an appropriate subject for today, which I usually term dumb luck, and I'll explain that in a minute. It is a subject that leads us in a lot of different directions, including in the direction of science, particularly bad science, that is discoveries that are in fact not real discoveries, they're just coincidences. Examples of people believing that God has done something that is a matter of coincidence or dumb luck or what have you. So it kind of feeds into a lot of different areas that I've wanted to talk about or have made videos on in the past. So let's get started. Now the tale begins with the selection of reviewers for two of my manuscripts. One of them is about fieldwork methods in anthropology, and the other is about Genesis in the Bible from the point of view of an anthropologist. So they're two quite different books, two quite different publishers on two different continents. One of the publishers is in England and the other is in North America. They don't know each other, and they had to do what publishers have to do. They had my manuscript and they needed to send them out to reviewers to decide whether the manuscripts are in good enough condition to go as is, or whether they need minor or major tinkering or whatever. Both of the books at this time were already under provisional contract. So the worst possible situation would be that reviews could come back and say, this book is rubbish, don't publish it, and that would be the end of it. And in fact, the Fieldwork Methods book, one of the reviewers did say that, but it went out for 4 reviews and the other 3 were very positive. So I did have to make some corrections, and I've been spending a lot of time doing that, and I hope that everything will be okay from now on. And the other one, the Genesis book, the publisher wanted to make sure that various constituencies, which include biblical scholars and anthropologists and general like clergy, rabbinical scholars, whatever, it covered a whole waterfront. And so he was a little skeptical about just publishing without making sure that those various constituencies weren't too ruffled in their feathers. And by and large not. I mean, you can't please everybody. With biblical scholarship, you're just not going to please everybody. Especially Hebrew books, and particularly Genesis. Like Genesis has got things like the creation in it, so it's got people who are in a huff about evolution and the flood and all kinds of stuff, and like some people believe the worldwide flood in Genesis actually happened, and they spend a lot of time trying to show how it happened, and there's other people who roll their eyes and can't believe that somebody takes that seriously. Same with evolution, and so on. So, I knew that I was on pretty tricky ground there, but I got a review back, or he got a review back, which he then sent to me from a biblical scholar. And he said, yeah, it's pretty good. Like the way you treat Hebrew language needs changing a little bit. Not important what the technical issues were here. I made those changes. And a couple of issues about the age of the source material that I was using, which is fair enough, but I wrote the book 15 years ago, so did need updating a little bit. That was okay. And then he sent it off to another reviewer. And the fieldwork book went off to 4 reviewers, one of whom actually wrote back to me after getting the review because it was my doctoral dissertation advisor. And that was understandable because the press had actually asked me for the names of 2 or 3 people that I would be okay with reviewing, and that's not unusual either for a press to say, okay, like tell us some of the people who you think would be sympathetic, and also some people that jolly well will not be sympathetic, so we don't use them. But they don't pick all of the ones that you choose, and they avoid the ones that you say you don't want. But most of them are people that they've chosen blind, and you don't know who they are. And even when they do the review, you don't know who they are. So it was staggering to me to discover about maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago that the Genesis book was reviewed by a woman. Not only did I know her, she was also one of the reviewers of the fieldwork book. And now your first thought could be, oh well, you recommended her. No, I didn't. Because when the reviews were first elicited, I didn't even know her. But here's the really strange thing. The reviews for both were elicited about a year ago. I think in the Genesis book, more like 7 months ago, and for the fieldwork book, closer to a year. I didn't know this woman until a lot later, when I submitted a joint paper with my son to a journal, and she's the editor. so sort of in between, I don't know if I can exactly parse the chronology, but basically the reviews went out without me knowing anything about this person. Then I was in contact with her, and she accepted the article, and she really liked it, and we got to be very close friends, and in fact now she and I are planning a new book together. And she was also, after she had submitted her review of the fieldwork book, she came on board as a consultant to help me make the changes that needed to be made. She's not a co-author of that, but she is listed as a major contributor. So about a week ago, she finally said, she said, I guess you suggested me as a reviewer for the Genesis book, and which is why I toned down my review a little bit. I didn't, she said, I loved it. I thought it was amazing, great, blah, 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 because she's kind of a fan. But she said, I toned it down because I didn't want to, look like I'm just a friend, being helpful. And I wrote back and I said, you have it completely wrong. Both the press and I had no idea that you even existed when the calls for reviews went out. Same with the fieldwork book. So I had 2 books under review, getting extremely positive reviews by the same person who I didn't know at the time that the reviews went out. What is that all about? I mean, it's, like my technical term there is dumb luck, really dumb luck. And she just couldn't believe it when I wrote to her and I said, no, this is pure coincidence, or she called it serendipity. Now, what are the chances that this could happen by accident? Well, you can't really put a number on it. I mean, because you can't just say that there's a 1 in however many number of anthropologists there are in the world chance. So let's say there are 20,000 anthropologists in the world. You can't say there's a 1 in 20,000 chance that somebody will be picked, because it has to do with what the subject matter is. They're not going to pick a brand new PhD as a reviewer, although they might, because the older established anthropologists don't want to write reviews, or they never pick me. They used to. 10, 20 years ago, I used to review books and journal articles and whatnot all the time. But then, because I stopped publishing regularly, my name wasn't out there all the time. So of course, one of the things that editors will do is they'll pick up a copy of a pertinent journal, the Society for Biblical Scholarship journal, whatever, thumb through it, find somebody who's got some empathy with anthropology, write to that person. What happens is that people often say no, because they don't want to do it, because it's a lot of work. It's not paid, not even acknowledged a lot of the time. So it takes a while. So I can't put a number on how many anthropologists could be contacted to review my books. But one of the things I can say is that a book about field research and a book about the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, it's not going to be calling on the same stock of anthropologists at all. It's going to be calling on very different subsets. Although I guess like field workers could be a lot broader, because we all do field work, and a great number of us probably teach field work methods. So that's a fairly broad lot. Biblical scholarship's really narrow. So first of all, I don't even understand why my publisher picked this person to do the review, since she doesn't even do biblical analysis. She does work on a related area. The book has to do with people trying to keep their cultural integrity through various rules, like marriage rules and so forth. And she does work kind of in that area, so that can be understandable. But what are the chances that 2 different editors and 2 different presses in 2 different continents would pick the same person to be a reviewer, and that person would happen to be somebody that in the interim I got to know and got to exchange a lot of information with? It's got to be minute. The probability, I mean, I don't know. Take a guess, but let's say it's one in, well, let's reduce it and say 1 in 1,000 times the second probability, 1 in 1,000, multiply them, that's 1 in a million. That sounds about fair. 1 in a million is a, the probability of that happening is minute. And so everyone is going to say, including this woman herself, is going to say, no, it can't be an accident. It's not possible. That they must have somehow known. You must have told them, or something. I don't know. But it brings up an important point, which I mentioned before in a video about what's called the p-value. The p-value of two things happening by accident is a decimal lower than 1. Like 1 means that the probability is absolutely certain. The probability that it's 50-50 would be 0.5, and so on. The probability of 1 in 20 is 0.05. And for a very long time, a p-value where two variables are correlated, the p-value less than 0.05 is considered to be statistical evidence that those two variables are not related by chance, but they're related by some physical mechanism or other. Doesn't tell you which one caused the other, or whether they're just correlated for some dumb reason. But the p-value says that this correlation is not an accident. So, I don't know, let's say, people smoking and people getting lung cancer. There's two correlations, and there the causal relationship has to be smoking to lung cancer, not the other way around. You can't say that people who will get lung cancer in the future are more inclined to smoke now than people who don't. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. There's an arrow of time there. So that if you find that the incidence of lung cancer is much, much higher in smokers than in non-smokers, and the p-value is under 0.05, then the claim is you have made a statistically significant correlation. Now, there's a whole lot of stuff about this that I don't want to go into, but so why 0.05? Well, that's arbitrary, but it's been relied upon for a very long time. Now, under serious question, there are other ways of finding the probability of things happening by accident or because of certain circumstances that are becoming much more prevalent, but still the p-value of 0.05 or less has been around for about 100 years. And it's one of the reasons that we get a lot of trash science, because there's a way of manipulating the p-value. It's called p-hacking. And again, I won't go into that, but you can understand that there's various ways that you can manipulate your data to make it look like it's better than it is. And so you end up with a lot of popular news programs and journal and newspaper articles saying things like, eating pizza is bad for you, and then the next week, pizza eating is good for you, prefaced with the statement, studies show. Well, what do those studies show? They show that they've taken a bunch of people and who eat pizza, and a bunch of people who don't eat pizza or whatever, and they've looked at things like heart disease or weight or stomach problems or whatever, and they've come up with some kind of correlation between something bad and pizza eating with a p-value below 0.05, and there's the conclusion. Well, you know, that p-value is arbitrary, and the manipulation of the variables and the way that the experiment is conducted and so forth, like all of those things can change the conclusion. And exactly the same is true when you look at people's religious beliefs. You know, when my friend, when she said, gosh, the serendipity shocks me, I said to her sardonically, well, an ordained Presbyterian minister would have a different take on it. That is, you know, when I had told her, no, I didn't put your name forward, this is just dumb luck, and she called it serendipity. Well, somebody who's got a slightly different theology from me would say, no, this is God's will. This is the working of God's plan for me. God has decided that I should have success with my publishing from now on, and so is guiding the editors at the presses towards people who are sympathetic towards you. So, and you don't know it. You know, you didn't know this person, but God knew. God knows all the patterns, and God decided this is the person to review your books right now. That would be a religious argument, and that kind of thinking relies on what social scientists call patternicity. That is, we have a tendency to see patterns in things even when they don't exist. Now in this case there is a pattern, but it's not a causal pattern. But there are also cases where people will look at something, maybe I can't think of a good example, but it could be something like what I used to do for a long time. I don't do it anymore. I used to wear waistcoats for formal occasions, and I often used to stick, let's say, a $20 bill, £5 note, you know, depending on what country I'm in, you know, like a fairly large, not like a gigantic amount of money, but you know, a good amount of money in one of the waistcoat pockets, like just in case. And then I would take my clothes off and forget that I'd stuck the $20 bill in the waistcoat. And then, you know, one day I'd either put the waistcoat on again and say, oh, great, £5, or you know, maybe I'd be searching through my clothes for something that I'd lost, and you know, and find the £5 note. And it just so happens that I needed to go out to dinner that night, but I didn't have any money. And wow, I've got this £5 note. And you know, the conclusion you can come to is God knew, you know, God directed you to stick that £5 note in that pocket so that it would be safe and you would forget about it, and then just when you needed it, there it is. Well, that's religious thinking, and it's no different from scientific thinking when it comes to p-value. Like, it's wishing that there is a relationship between two things when there isn't. And even when your methodology makes you believe that it is statistically viable. So in this area, as in a lot of other areas that I've talked about, and here I'm kind of being general and maybe a bit simplistic, obviously, but what I'm suggesting is that this is an area of thinking where the scientific model and religious thinking are not as far apart as you would imagine. Why is that? Well, it has to do with patternicity. It has to do with wanting to believe things, even though there's no evidence for them. And it's a bit of a shock to many, I'm sure, to discover that the scientific world is as much, that's going too far, is prey to this way of thinking. Prey to it because academics in universities have to publish and have to find significance in their studies all the time because their security and promotion depends upon it. When you go up for a tenure review, the tenure committee is likely to care about the quality of your work, but it also cares about the quantity of your work. And if you need one or two extra papers, or you've got some good ones in there, but you want one or two more, you might risk publishing something that's a bit sketchy because it's going to get you your tenure or promotion or a new job or whatever. So that's dumb luck. And I am the recipient of dumb luck this year, and I'm really glad of it, and I'm really glad that it is just dumb luck, that it wasn't something that I wheedled, because it means that the reviews are genuine, and that makes me happy. So if you have the chance, please tell your friends about these videos. Please like, please subscribe. And I'm going to talk more about luck on Friday. I'm going to combine it with a study of skill and look at what things are produced by skill, what things are produced by luck, what are a combination, and how do we sort the one from the other. Have a good week.